The political battle over replacing Scalia is heating up. If Republicans stonewall the president and the process, will that backfire on them? Then the government says pony up. They're forcing Apple to unlock some of its latest technology so the FBI can get information in a terror case. Is this a needed tool or a major privacy infringement? Then we're meeting the people running for key races in our area. And tonight, Andrew speaks one-on-one with the Democratic congressional candidate, Zephyr Teachout. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us. And we begin tonight with the death of Justice Antonin Scalia. His body will lie in state at the Supreme Court this Friday, and he will be laid to rest Saturday. Now, while the funeral arrangements are being made, the political feud, it rages on. Well, President Obama is doubling down. A top Republican could be backing down. The president had this to say just yesterday.
The Constitution is pretty clear about what is supposed to happen now. When there is a vacancy on the Supreme Court, the President of the United States is to nominate someone. The Senate is to consider that nomination, and either they disapprove of that nominee or that nominee is elevated to the Supreme Court.
Republican Senator Chuck Grassley, the head of the Judiciary Committee, appears to be softening his stance. The Iowan initially said that the Senate would not even vote on anyone that the president nominates. Now he's had a little change of heart.
I would wait until the nominee is made before I would make any decisions. In other words, take it a step at a time.
And for more, let's bring in Daily Beast special correspondent Michael Tomasky here to talk about all the twists and turns in where the Supreme Court could go and the political implications attached to it. Michael, thanks for a few minutes. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Is it possible, as we just saw with Grassley, at least stepping things back, if not even more than that, the Republicans kind of box them in themselves in here? They confirm some of the worst suspicions, whether it be obstructionism or maybe even hypocrisy when it comes to the strict constructionism, except in this case.
Yeah, well, here's what I think happened. You have to remember, McConnell is not liked by the far-right base. They distrust him and John Boehner, who's not the speaker anymore, but they feel that McConnell and Boehner, this is some people's version of reality. They feel that McConnell and Boehner have capitulated to Obama on many occasions and so on and so forth. So McConnell, I'm sure he knew that the base and Rush Limbaugh and all those kind of people were going to make this demand of him that he clamp down on the chance of Obama getting a nominee through it. So I think he just decided, I better say it before, I'm pressured into saying it. So now some Republicans like Grassley, Dean Heller, who's a senator from Nevada, have come out and said, well, let's maybe at least give the person a hearing. There's still zero chance that Obama's going to get a nominee through. I mean, zero. But they might, give the person a hearing.
When you say zero, is that zero if the president tries to put through justice politically, the equivalent of a Kagan through, or it doesn't matter who he nominates? It could be Orrin Hatch. That candidate's not getting through.
Yeah, Orrin Hatch might get through, but Pope Francis would not get through. Okay? That's the kind of zero I mean. And why would Obama not nominate someone like Elena Kagan? She's not some radical. She's a mainstream center-left jurist, and so that's who he wants. He's a Democratic president. That's the kind of person he's going to put on. So there's no harm or crime in Obama putting on a person whose ideology he agrees with. So he's not going to bend as far as the Republicans are saying. Orrin Hatch, that's a crazy idea. Obama's base would go nuts, and rightly so.
But if I'm cynical here, I could even attach a motive to the Republicans and say, I probably get a better deal now, where the president knows that he can't nominate a liberal and have any chance. If he gives a moderate, and the name Merrick Garland's set out there, Orrin Hatch even gave him his blessing a few years back here, where they, I think, confirmed him 97-0 for an appellate court position. Maybe they get a more moderate justice now than they will be if a Democrat gets elected in November. They have maybe a stronger hand to play now than then.
That may be. Rich. That truly may be. That makes a lot of sense. But it's all speculative, and we just can't know. And I would think that on balance, Republicans, driven by a base that will be howling if they capitulate, I think they'd rather just take their chances that, hey, maybe we'll win this election, and then, we'll get to make this point.
Let's say it follows, and I think the betting wisdom is, Michael, you're right here, that even if this nomination procedure gets through a committee, it actually gets up for a floor vote, that there's little to no chance this person will get confirmed. How does that impact potentially the election? And not just the election, but also some of these Senate seats here that are in these swing states that are kind of purple right now, that 2 or 3 points one way or the other could really decide if Republicans keep their jobs.
You're absolutely right. It fires up both bases, obviously. It makes the issue of the Supreme Court much more a central issue, concrete issue in the election. I think it probably benefits the Democratic side a little bit more because they will see that if they win, the Republicans, even if the Republicans control the Senate, will have to put in the Democratic president's person, because what the Republicans are saying right now is, no, let's let the American people decide. So then on November 8th or whatever date it is, Hillary Clinton, or possibly Bernie Sanders, I suppose, could say, hey, your position was let the American people decide. Well, the American people decided. You're going to block me now? I don't think they're going to be able to do that then. So I think just slightly more revved up will be liberal voters. And then quickly on the Senate races, yeah, there are 5 Republican senators in purple-blue states who would probably, will be under a lot of pressure to take the position in their campaign that they're going to buck their party and go along with whoever President Clinton hypothetically would put on the court.
And finally, Michael, for folks who say, oh, this is just a political, gamesmanship back and forth, there's some cases that were pending, let alone that were potentially in the next session for the U.S. Supreme Court, whether it was the union dues case. We don't know if they ruled. They just haven't put the opinions out. There are affirmative action cases in the not-too-distant future. Those cases where it probably would have been 5-4 on the conservative side, theoretically, will sit 4-4 theoretically. And we're going to have to wait a bit longer. We don't know just yet here, but there could be a real impact on the court regardless of what the Senate does, as long as they don't confirm another justice, right?
Absolutely right. And then if the Supreme Court has a tie vote, then the decision of the lower court stands. And then they have to wait for the case to work its way back up to the Supreme Court when the Supreme Court has an odd number of members. So, all that can take a long, long time in some of these cases that you name. It could be 3-4 years.
If you think that political polarization is bad, it's about to go into hyperspace now with the latest Supreme Court vacancy. Michael, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right, let's bring in the guys. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Andrew Whitman, senior political correspondent. I do think Republicans overplayed their hand, and as we were saying before, it's not just Grassley who's stepping this thing back, but their problem is, forget about the right-wing radio. Every candidate in the trail says, no chance, no how. You can't even so much as even consider a name here, because they're concerned about the primaries, not the general at this point. Republicans kind of boxed themselves in.
I mean, they have and they haven't. John McCain's not worried about blocking the nomination. He's up for re-election in Arizona this year. He's going to safely win in all likelihood. So anybody in a safe Republican seat really doesn't care. But you're talking about those swing state Republicans. They're the ones who are in a slightly awkward position, and you're starting to see more and more of them defect.
I'm not saying all Republicans, but this is an issue now, Dominic, that people frankly weren't paying that much attention to in the presidential race. But now all of a sudden, somebody can and should say, in the debates we're going to hear in the general, okay, what do you want to see? Do you want to see Obamacare repealed? Or before it was a silly question, kind of. Now, all of a sudden, depending on the justice that you want, maybe this is a question for consideration. Where do you feel about affirmative action? Where do you feel about a whole host of different issues? Do you think Citizens United should be repealed or not? We've done the math here. You've got Ginsburg, who's 83, Kennedy, who's 80. You've got other justices that have had health issues as well. Very conceivably, this next president, even if it's just a 4-year term, could, on top of Scalia, if no one's confirmed in the next 9 months, put 3 people on the bench, which will possibly be the biggest impact that president will have historically, let alone if he or she's elected for 4 to 8 for a second term as well. This is going to be a big issue that the regular person will kind of care about, don't you think?
It's already a big issue. The Republicans have, and I'm not even talking about Republicans in districts that, you know, where it's shaky. They have boxed themselves in completely. Democrats were looking for a way to energize the base, and they got it. Checkmate. They fell right into Obama's hands. What he's going to do, if he puts up somebody like a Loretta Lynch, a black woman that you just confirmed, and now she's not good enough, what do you think that's going to do to the Democratic base, the turnout? Historically, for the first black woman to be turned down or blocked by the Senate, what do you think that's going to do to turnout?
But I would counter that by saying it's also activating the Republican base, and the obstructionism and the call for not even having hearings, I think, is activating some of the Republican voters out there who are caught up in the election cycle.
But we always know it, Andrew. It comes down to the undecided voters that aren't in either camp. And to those undecided voters, isn't it more fair to say, to Dom's point, wait a minute, I get it, you don't like this president, maybe I don't love him either, but you guys got a job to do.
Well,
who are you to be playing and changing the rules in the middle of the game?
That's exactly right. It's not. I don't think it's the ideological balancing on the individual issues. Those are going to play to both bases, and both bases will respond in kind. It's a good government issue. It's a functioning government issue. And if there were lingering questions about Republicans, if voters had forgotten about the shutdown or the debt limit fights or all of these other bits of obstruction that we've seen under President Obama, it's a reminder that Republicans in this one particular and very pressing case are absolutely grinding the gears of government to a halt simply because of their ideology and because they don't like the president.
And
that's dangerous.
And I said this to Michael, and I mean it. Forget about it. As he said, the obstructionism, I agree with him. The hypocrisy, too. I mean, these are the same guys who say, we want a strict constructionist. That's what we want. Well, the Constitution clearly says in Article 2, it's the president's job to nominate somebody you hear. Who are you guys to say you're not even going to consider it? The arrogance of that. But leave that aside. You can get a better justice now if you're the Republicans. The betting line is you're not going to win the presidency this time around. I mean, things can happen. Maybe they do win. But do you really want to take a chance that somebody out of Cruz or Trump, who knows, is going to emerge and beat the Democratic nominee, theoretically Hillary Clinton? All of us would go to Vegas right now and bet on Hillary in that situation. And then they got to confirm who she puts up. You could drive a better bargain and get a justice that is more moderate. And who knows, maybe they'll be the Republican equivalent of the Kennedy, a Republican or a Breyer, a nominee that turns out to be more conservative than you think. I think they get a better deal now.
I don't know about that, Richard. If they played the game the way you want to, their base would be livid. If you think they feel that Obama controls them now, what do you think the base is going to say in talk radio that you mentioned? What do you think the base is going to say if they play ball with him right now? The reason why I say checkmate for Obama, the Democratic base, specifically the black vote, has been referred to in 2008 and in 2012 as the sleeping giant that was awakened. And when you look at the sleeping giant, what have we seen the last couple of years? Republican governors trying to crack down on voter fraud. In other words, block certain demographics from voting. Because they know that if these groups turn out, they cannot win. And so I say checkmate, because if you vote down the current Attorney General, you're going to get the same black turnout as you did with Obama running for the first time as the first black president. And the Republicans cannot win if they get that same type of turnout.
And there's some other minority candidates whose names are also being floated out there as well, including the Attorney General from California, also an African-American woman, an Indian-American, who would be the first candidate, obviously, from that ethnicity as well here. So it's going to be fascinating. There's the political element to this. There's the judicial, the good government angle to this. There's the presidential portion of this. and the historical. So we will follow it. As mentioned before, Friday, Justice Scalia will lie instated, and then on Saturday, he will be buried. We'll continue to follow that story. But coming up next, we switch gears. Apple battling the U.S. government. A court forcing it to unlock the iPhone of one of the San Bernardino shooters here. The tech giant says, hey, you do this. It opens the door wide open to major privacy violations. The feds say we needed to crack the case. And everyone will be impacted one way or the other. When we come back, I'll ask a guest, who's right?